Welcome everyone to our Firewise monthly workshop, and thank you for joining today. We host these workshops every third Friday of the month on Zoom at 1 p.m. These workshops are hosted by our nonprofit organization, the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council. I am a Firewise Regional Coordinator and will be your host today, but we're going to be mainly talking about home hardening and defensible space with our communications and outreach specialist, Myra DeLeon. And I'll also briefly go over Firewise annual renewals. I'll actually walk you step by step through the Firewise annual renewals. So welcome and thank you. A couple of ground rules before we really get started is if you can mute yourself during the presentation portion, we'd really appreciate that. You can write down your questions or drop questions in the chat. We always save space for a Q&A at the end of these meetings. And then turn off your camera if you don't want to be recorded, but this will be recorded and available for you on YouTube. Since we have so much to speak about today, me and Myra might go pretty fast, so it's kind of nice to have it recorded on YouTube for you to slow it down later. And then we do use the raise your hand feature at the Q&A, but if there's just a few of us in the meeting today, we might just allow you to unmute your mics. And then allow space for everyone to speak during the Q&A. If you're new to Firewise or haven't watched this video yet, this is a video available on our website, venturafiresafe.org/FirewiseUSA, and it's a 5-minute video that goes over all of the basics of Firewise and how to apply. So I highly recommend you check that out. Even sharing it with new members of your Firewise leadership team is a really helpful thing to do as well. Our agenda for today. So first, we're going to go over some program updates. Myra will take it away with some upcoming events. I'll go ahead and walk you step by step through the Firewise annual renewals. I'll go about 10 minutes on that. And then we're going to go to Myra, who will talk about home hardening and defensible space. And then we saved 15 minutes at the end of today's meeting for a Q&A. All right, Myra, you can go ahead and share the events.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Natasha. And I do want to invite you all as our first announcement to our 2025 end of the year event. We've been having these celebrations every year for the last couple of years around November. And this year, I want you to save the date for November 6th. If you can join us, we are officially November 6th is actually the 1-year anniversary from the mountain fire that happened last year in Camarillo. And so a big focal point of the event this year is going to be appreciating and honoring the people that were either first responders for the mountain fire, community members and volunteers that have helped with the rebuilding process for the mountain fire. But really the event every year is meant to be basically a celebration of all of the effort and work to make Ventura County a more resilient, wildfire resilient community. And we really hope that you join us. The event itself is from 5:30 to 8 p.m. and we host it at Topa Topa Brewing Company at the Colt Street location in Ventura. And I believe if you haven't gotten the invitation via email already, make sure you sign up for our newsletter because that is where we'll have reminders about it. The RSVP is free. All you have to do is just reserve your spot and we will be handing out drink tickets then. We'll have some music, some speakers, and we're actually going to be making a pretty special announcement on that night as well. So, and that is directly tied to all of our programming and resources. And we're hoping to keep our programming growing. And again, that announcement is going to be made at that event. And so go ahead to the next slide. The other programs that we have coming up is we're actually making a call out to any businesses, primarily home contractors, home building contractors, and landscapers. We really want to tie local businesses in with the conversation surrounding wildfire safety. And so we've been able to put these two courses together together that are happening in October, specifically for local businesses in Ventura County that would like to align their businesses and educate on best practices for wildfire safety. So the really cool thing about this is that, I think one of the biggest questions that we've gotten at the Fire Safe Council is asking about contractors, like who can I go to for replacing my vents? Who can I go to? What contractors are there out there? Because it's been a little bit challenging in the last year or two to find contractors that know exactly not just the products that they're selling, but the reasoning why we need to look for ember resistant vents or can actually do the work. And we're hoping that by aligning these businesses with our educational practices and updating them on regulations and guidelines from Ventura County Fire Department and that sort of thing, that we're really working to kind of all be on the same page when it comes to wildfire safety and building, and whether it's preparing for wildfire or in the rebuilding process. So if you know of anybody, if you know local businesses that might be interested in taking this course, please forward this over to them. The links are in the chat, and it's a quick form. Basically, there is limited availability, so we ask them to just fill out the form, and then our head of wildfire safety, Max, will be contacting them and vetting them to get added onto the list for this course. So that is it. I invite you to have your local friends or business owners to fill that out. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, now I'm just going to pass it back to Natasha. Go ahead.
All right, so sorry, this is a little bit of a wordy slide, but we're going to have way more pictures in the slides upcoming. So for those of you who are already part of the Firewise program, this is going to be mainly for you. But even if you're thinking of joining the Firewise USA program, it's also good to know about this as well. So as a brief overview of Firewise, you are required to have an annual renewal. And in that annual renewal, I'll be discussing some of those things, but you'll have to have some vegetation removed in a year and some sort of record of hours or money that you've spent in that calendar year. It's very similar to the initial application if you've already applied for Firewise. It's just updating that. The deadline this year for renewals is going to be November 21st. If you have become a Firewise community this year, you submitted an application in 2025, you will not have to do a renewal this year. Your next renewal requirement will be in November next year, 2026. It's up to each individual to submit their renewals on time at portal.firewise.org. Our Fire Safe Council does not review these applications, but we can assist you. And then if you may have heard already, but there's a new California 3-year action plan that was launched this year in 2025, March 2025. Any new Firewise communities will be using this template. If you're working with me on your Firewise application, we're using that template. And if you are a community that's up for a renewal for your action plan, you have to renew your action plan every 3 years. You'll have to use this new California template that's available on our Firewise webpage. And then if you have any questions, you can schedule a chat with me. How do you schedule a chat with me? You can go to venturafiresafe.org/Firewise, and then down below, you'll see our monthly Firewise workshops. That's where you can watch the past recording of this workshop later next week, or schedule a chat with me to talk about your renewals or your Firewise application, etc. I do respond to my chat. If you schedule a chat with me, it's immediately on my calendar. So some of you may have realized that my email inbox is pretty full, but if you schedule a chat, that secures time to chat with me. All right, so in renewals, I'm going to go step by step. So once you enter portal.firewise.org, if you are a community that can renew, you'll have this button on the top left that says Start Renewal Application. You'll go ahead and click that. Then when you click that, you'll be entered into this page, step 1 of 10 on the right, and you'll be prompted to update your site information. Things like your street address, if there's any changes to your resident leaders, how many dwelling units and homes you have in your community or residence. You can update all of that in step 2 of 10. Then step 3 of 10 is simply stating, hey, there's a new California action plan. Do you know about it? And if you know about it, you'll select, I have reviewed my state's requirements. Step 4 of 10 is just asking you to update your risk assessment. This is required every 5 years. You're required to update your risk assessment. If it's not up for renewal, you can go ahead and where that arrow is pointing, select reuse the current assessment. If you have updated your risk assessment and you wish to upload it, you're welcome to do that as well. Just select upload a new risk assessment right above. Step 5 of 10, to update your board or committee. So if you have new members of your Firewise leadership team or some of them have left, this is your opportunity to update that. Step 6 of 10 is the same thing over here, to update your action plan. If you do not wish to update your action plan, it hasn't been the 3 years, you can select that reuse the current action plan. But if you are up for renewal or you wish to update your action plan earlier than 3 years, then you can go ahead and select upload a new action plan, but you will have to use the California action template, the newest template, in order to be approved. And then step 7 of 10 is to record an educational outreach activity or event. So some of you may already know this, but as Firewise, you have to do at least one annual activity or event. That could be going door to door, distributing welcome packets. It could be hosting a community-wide presentation that talks about wildfire, or other. You can select other if you're doing some sort of other activity to promote wildfire safety in your community. Step 8 of 10 is to record a vegetation removal, something like we removed a couple of hazardous vegetation, trees, or anything like that, really. But there's no minimum requirement of how much you have to remove. Step 9 of 10, we're closing in on the end of this application, is to record your investment. You'll see at the bottom left corner, it says record hours worked or record money spent. On the right, this is what it looks like if you're selecting the record hours worked. You can do both, but even something like attending this workshop would count towards your hours. So you could say like 5 hours in miscellaneous, and then your entry note down below would say, hours attending regional monthly Firewise workshop with Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council, something like that. But those are the hours. Most people get really nervous about this step. It is something that most communities knock out of the park. You are most likely meeting all of your hours. You just have to record it in here. And then that is it for the renewal. Then you just have to simply review your application in step 10 of 10 and then submit when you're ready. So if you have any questions on this, you're welcome to schedule a chat with me. I'd say save your questions for the end during our Q&A if you have any more questions on the Firewise annual renewals. And then if you schedule a chat with me, I'll walk you right through it. We'll share a screen and we'll submit it together. And then another reminder, this is for recognized Firewise communities. We currently have funding for $1,000 to $2,000 with our Fire Safe Council. I have personally emailed every resident leader. So ask your resident leader if they've received an email from me. You will have to provide a quote from a vendor if you would like to apply and apply for any sort of funding from us. The deadline to apply is Sunday, October 19th, which is my birthday, actually. But you will hear back from us in mid-December on whether your application has been accepted or denied. And then if you've been approved to spend, then you can invoice us by February. That's all for the Firewise specific reminders. Now we'll be passing it off to Myra, who's going to share about home hardening.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Okay, so biggest takeaway is deadline to apply is before Natasha's birthday. Got it. So let's go ahead and move on to our section of home hardening and defensible space. And with that, I do want to say that with the caveat that we are fully aware that there is a lot of debate going around the Zone Zero regulations. And so we're not going to super deep dive into those regulations. But if you do have questions about those, just a couple days ago, there was a town hall that I believe it was Jeff Gorell's office that that held this town hall, and they really did a deep dive on guidelines, regulations, etc. And it's like a 2 hour long Q&A basically. And so I really encourage you to like look at that video of the recording. It is going to be in the chat, I believe. Natasha, if you could post that in the chat, that would be great. And you're welcome to kind of look over that. We also have the Ventura County Fire Department's guidelines and regulations posted on our website as well. So if you are unfamiliar with their website, I'm going to put it in the chat, but essentially if you go to venturafiresafe.org/defensible space, that page, if you scroll all the way down, it'll have sections on when the Board of Forestry has information about their town halls. Really, it's imperative that we submit public comment if you have comments about the Zone Zero, the Zone Zero debates, essentially, but because they do want to know what local residents, what that input is from local residents, because that's their job, is to listen to us as residents, right? So submit public comment. The links are on there. And then if you keep scrolling down, there's a section that has information from CAL FIRE, Ventura County Fire Department, and then other local regulations. If you go to Ventura County Fire Department, the standards and guidelines section will be on there. And that I refer to you to check out the regulation portion is, I believe, the standard 418 and or 515, and then the guidelines is 418. So please check out that webpage. But otherwise, I'll go ahead and start off with just recapping home hardening. So per the Institute of Business and Home Safety, the structural vegetation modifications can reduce risk up to 75%. And the definition that we have for home hardening is essentially just to make any type of changes to your current structure, your home, that makes your home more resilient to wildfire. And so go ahead and go to the next slide, Natasha. So the things that we're looking for when we talk about home hardening, these are particular to the structure themselves, right? So we're looking for a reinforced roof, vents that are ember resistant, meaning either I believe standard building code before 2010 was 1/4-inch vents along any of the homes, and new building protocol after 2010 typically has the standard 1/8-inch, which is the minimum that we ask for ember resistant vents. There is a spectrum on products out there that are more ember resistant. So you basically think about like a car. You could get a Honda Civic and it still does the job and gets you from point A to point B, or you can get a Mercedes and it's a little bit more brand and luxurious, but it'll still get you from point A to point B, right? So 1/8-inch vents do the job. They're really economic, but we have seen products out there like Brand Guard and Vulcan vents, stuff like that. So you just have to do a little bit of research about what those are. But essentially we're looking for anything as far as the structure goes where we want to prevent embers from either accumulating, festering anywhere, or combusting or igniting any materials. So that would include cracked siding, peeling paint, cleaning off any debris out of your gutters, making sure your eaves are either boxed in or closed up so that it's also preventing birds from nesting there, because birds' nests are essentially fuel, right? They're made out of dry leaves or twigs or debris. Clearing our roofs of debris as well. Making sure our skylights or anything like that really doesn't leave the opportunity for embers to accumulate there. This includes vegetation, but we'll get into that. Yes, so perfect. Next slide is the structural weaknesses. So this is the examples that we're looking for, right? A lot of the ceramic rooftops that have the little that are a little bit more wavy in pattern sometimes require bird stops or some type of seal for to prevent embers from getting into the underlayment of the roof there. Again, I talked about vents. The picture at the very top is more of a boxed in eave, but we know a lot of older houses might have some exposed wooden beams going along the bottom of that. And so if those aren't sealed properly, then they might have some cracks or openings that are more than an 1/8 inch where embers can kind of slide in there. Go ahead and go to the next one. So just some examples of vents. The high risk side, we can't necessarily tell. I don't think there is a vent there, so or a mesh screen. So I think that's like a mouse or like some critter getting into that attic. And so one of the biggest things I kind of tell people is if critters can get into your attic spaces or your house somehow, embers are very tricky. They will try to get in there using those same areas as well. Next slide. So another example of the bird stops. They're called bird stops, I believe, because it prevents birds really from being able to, put their nests in those little crevices. And so we really want to use bird stops where we can. Some manufacturers have pre-cut bird stops, and then some people can actually just screen those. And so we can get really creative on how those applications do work. Go ahead and next. Oh, perfect. Thanks, Natasha. And so again, just to reiterate the differences between what home hardening is and what defensible space is, because those are two different topics, but they do go hand in hand in protecting your structure. I actually just read an article from UC Berkeley. They made the news just recently about a study that just came out last month about how using home hardening and defensible space in tandem can double your resilience to wildfire and extremely lower your risk. So that study is published already. It was peer reviewed, and like I said, UC Berkeley was the publisher. So I'm sure if you do a quick Google search, that article will come up as well. Next slide. Okay, so defensible space. So we talked about home hardening being the structural differences in home and defensible space is essentially creating breakpoints from which you stop a fire from reaching your home. So this is where we get into those zones, and the most critical zone that we're going to talk about is the zone 0 area, which is 0 to 5 feet around the structure itself. Zone 1 is 5 to 30 feet, and then zone 2 is 30 to 100 foot outside. We know that not every property is that large, so as far as the definition goes, that is a little bit more malleable. So we say zone 2, 30 to 100 foot, or up to the property line, if you want to know about, I guess, like whose responsibility it is to maintain that property. Go ahead and go to the next one. So first we're going to talk about zone 0, and they call this the ember resistant zone. Like I said before, there has been a lot of debate on regulation about whether zone 0 is a combustible free completely zone or an ember resistant zone. We align with Ventura County Fire Department's guidances about keeping ember resistant zones. And if you take a look at the guideline 418, it does talk about just lowering the amount of combustible items in that zone, making sure that the vegetation is at a minimum. If you're not 100% sure, I would definitely refer to those guidelines. And then if you have any questions, feel free to email us. We don't always know the answers immediately because we're not the experts, but we're trying to be as informed as possible, and then we will try to get you the right information as soon as we can. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So in this zone 0, what we're trying to do is prevent that either horizontal path or a vertical path directly up to the structure. So that means that if you do have a combustible fence line, if it directly connects to the structure, we want at least 5 feet of non-combustible. I know a lot of the regulation within those high fire zones, as of I think the end of this year, it'll start. I think there's a 3-year grace period, but essentially there's going to be regulation on combustible fence lines within 5 feet of the structure. And those we request, we're really guiding people to try to replace at least the first 5 feet. If your fence line is wooden and it goes all the way to the back side of the property, I mean, that is it's a continuous path of fire, right? Of potential fire. So at least breaking those first 5 feet, then the fence line doesn't actually get to the structure. So a really good tip here is I always say that, like, if let's say that's a gate actually, and it literally you can prop it open. If you don't have enough time, let's say you've been saving up and you would like to replace your gate, but let's say it's still the way it is, and you have a gate that's there that is combustible, just during a wildfire, and let's say before you evacuate, just prop that open. Now you've created that break point. It's really just try to take care of the low-hanging fruit first, and then, we strive for progress, not perfection, on these principles. Horizontal paths also include vegetation. If you have shrubs that are making a straight line and connect all the way up to the structure, same principle, right? It's just creating some space in between, so you're creating those breakpoints. Go ahead on the next slide. And so the reasoning behind this is because this photograph is from the Institute of Business and Home Safety, but the studies that they're really showing is that they want to show the paths of the embers when they are being essentially blasted onto a structure, right? So I like this picture because you could see a little bit of, like, not just that the embers like hit the structure and then just go around it, but that you could see the pathway of how some of those actually are ricocheting at the bottom corner of that and kind of getting blown back and around the structure. And what that tells us is that, let's say there was a small shrub in that area, or let's say you have like wooden chips in that area. If the embers are hitting the structure and coming back down into that wooden mulch area, it's another opportunity for a radiant heat source if that plant or those wooden chips ignite to essentially reflect that radiant heat back onto your structure. And so that's why the wooden mulch and the zone 0 is so important. If there's nothing to burn, nothing will burn, but obviously we live in a very realistic world, and so we say ember resistant, not completely combustible free, because we're trying to minimize the potential there. So risk is never zero, but we hope that with the things that we do, we can lower that risk. Go ahead and go to that next slide. So some extra examples would just be, the vegetation. If they're on rooftops within the first 5 feet, the biggest takeaway for me sometimes when I look at the vegetation is how dense is it? Some of these shrubs, like at the bottom right corner, are super green on the outside, but then you open them up and they're super twiggy on the inside. And so if it's a really dense shrub, I can only imagine how much more fuel it has on the inside, or radiant heat to blast back onto that home. If you go to the next slide, this is a perfect example of how twiggy or dense a shrub can be. And so on the right side, obviously, just kind of gives that good example. On the left side, we're just wanting to give the option saying, instead of that wooden mulch, we can do some rockscaping. We can get creative with how we're landscaping. And it's not a black and white example or conversation, but it does get a little complex sometimes when you're starting to get into the nitty-gritty or into the weeds of this conversation. So let's go to the next slide. Some other things that people don't take into consideration, or that sometimes they take for granted, is that there could be other combustible items in that area, like the straw doormats, or the combustible furniture. Not necessarily, it could be, for example, the like actual material of the chairs, but a lot of the times it's like the foam furniture, the foam pillows that are accenting those chairs, that create a lot of heat because there are all these synthetic materials, and because they're foam, they hold a lot of oxygen inside, right? So it's a lot of really combustible material that can radiate a lot of heat, especially for that d- what is it, like love seat that's right there. It's like right up against a window. And so if that window is a single pane window, you can definitely bet that that would essentially combust pretty immediately. But if it's a double pane tempered glass, it's still gonna heat up, but maybe it takes a little bit more because it is a double pane window. But we definitely just don't want to leave the chance that that radiant heat will essentially combust that window. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So the next zone is zone 1, which is, they call that the lean, clean, and green zone. It's 5 to 30 feet out from around the structure. And uh, I think pattern that we're seeing here is that the farther away you get from the structure, the more, a little bit more lenient you can be with some of these rules. But as far as we understand, at least the studies that we're seeing, is that the biggest concern once a wildfire has entered into a community is that it's no longer a wildfire, right? It's a structure to structure fire. And so the concern is that nowadays, when you purchase a home, there's developers, there's more I guess square footage to a house than there is acreage in the yard and spacing around it. And so what we're trying to emphasize is that we want to keep as little combustible material that could potentially radiate heat onto the structure. And so in this zone 1, some of the considerations that people are not really taking into consideration would be some things like sheds or gazebos or detached external structures or additional structures that might also pose a risk to the structure separation distance between you and your neighbor. And so, yeah, thank you, Natasha. So this is another example of that wooden fence line. If we have at least that 5-foot clearance, we're hoping that those flames cannot reach the eaves of the home next to it or that structure. So just an example, but whether it's a wooden fence line, I'm thinking that could also be a really dense shrub or a tree. Also, vinyl, we've heard as well, is not necessarily the greatest material as well. So if you're thinking of replacing a wooden fence line with something like vinyl, it also melts, and it's also a oil-based product, and so those synthetic materials will still radiate a lot of heat. So we're hoping for like a hardy board or non-combustible, like a metal fence. And again, you can get creative with a lot of that kind of stuff. Go ahead on the next slide. And this is just an example of the house that we saw in Lahaina during the Maui fire a couple years ago. And so there's a lot of destruction around it. And this was just an example of a house that coincidentally had just been renovated a little bit before the fire came through. And so a lot of the news outlets kept calling it the miracle house. And I did a little bit of digging, and I found essentially a picture of the house before the renovation and then after the renovation. So go ahead in the next slide. So this was a picture of the house before they did the renovation, and there's a couple things I'm identifying when I look at this picture. From the picture in the last slide, it has a completely new roof. So it looks like it's an older roof. There's a lot of vegetation right up against the windows, right up into like the front door of the house. Then go ahead and go to the next slide, Natasha. Post renovation, it looks like it's a metal roof, and then they also started doing some rock landscaping in the first 5 feet. And so they still applied, palm trees. They're in Hawaii, so we can't judge them there. It's pretty standard for the area, but and I think in the bigger takeaway too that I'm seeing is that even during the pre and the post, there's a palm tree in the background that has like this really big shrub, this big palm tree with a lot of like dried palms in the background, if you see it on the right side. In the aerial view, all of those palm trees are completely burnt, right? But I think it really goes to show that a lot of chaos can happen in that zone 1 and 2. But if your zone 0 is really tight and as clean as possible, then you really have given yourself like the biggest chance for survival. I don't, that goes without saying that I don't think you have to do like a $50,000 to $100,000 renovation on your house. But I think, like I said, just the things that we can do or that are feasible or are the things that, like anything you do, whether it's a low-hanging fruit or something larger, is already progress towards that. And I think it's already lowering that risk. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Another example of the vegetation. And so the biggest takeaway here would be essentially creating, again, a little bit more of that 5-foot separation distance, but also with the shrubs, what I'm saying is that I'm seeing these clusters of shrubs together, but then not a continuous line of shrubs leading out to either to the structure or around it. So I thought those were some good examples of the principles. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And so lastly, zone 2 is called the reduced fuel zone. And so again, it's the 30 to 100-foot radius or up to the property line. Some properties have already reached this, in zone 1 is the property line. But I think the biggest takeaway with this is that if your property has like a long driveway or has open space behind it, you're really trying to reduce the amount of potential pathways of fire back to the zone 1 that then can lead back to zone 0. Go ahead and go to the next slide. If you have a long driveway or a street with a lot of vegetation, it's a reminder that you're not just keeping your own structure and home safe, but you're also giving the best chance for firefighters to come and defend your neighborhood and your home. An engine having, to make the split-second decision of which neighborhood to go into is going to make the decision of where he or she or that engine, what neighborhood they're going to go into based on how safe they feel that they can defend from that spot. So go ahead and go to the next slide. In these neighborhoods where there are a lot of overarching oaks and pathways or driveways, and if there are fire lines in the more rural areas of Ventura County, we definitely want to keep our roadsides as wide as possible just so that we know that those engines can make it through. Again, we don't want to put them in danger as well. And then lastly, go ahead and the last slide. And then lastly, I did want to put this slide in here because we've gotten a lot of questions about additional products. Like, what if I can buy a fire resistant paint to put onto my home? What if we can put a sprinkler system in place? What if we can have some pool pumps so that way we can help firefighters if they need it? Those questions are very valid and they're really interesting because I think that I think the biggest takeaway for me is that if these products, like, there's not a lot of research that backs up the science behind these products, but I understand the thought process of why these products would be helpful during a wildfire. And the biggest takeaway for me is that if the product itself is self-reliant, meaning you're not going to need a power, like what if the power goes out, if you're using your pool water as opposed, or a tank as opposed to the local line, and are not interfering with like the pressure for firefighters. I'm not sure how that works. If it doesn't take a lot of setup to do and you can just sort of turn it on and leave it and go, and if it's feasible for you, because a lot of these systems can be very expensive, then I would say go for it. But the biggest caveat about this is that these products or systems should always be a supplemental in addition to system, but should never actually replace the principles for home hardening or defensible space. The biggest thing about the pool pumps is that pool pumps actually could be useful even if you have a house fire that's happening right for you or something like that. But during a wildfire, if you've been asked to evacuate, you are making the choice if you want to stay, but it really, it really might cost firefighter resources if you end up in a pickle where you do have to ask for help. And also the pool pumps, firefighters, every single engine has massive pumps that they will use every single time and they test out every single day before they go out onto a fire. So if they see a local pool pump on a house, they will do everything. If they need it at a last minute, sure, they'll try to use it, but they will do everything they can to have all of the resources on their engine first and foremost. So we've been told that they most likely will not use it unless they have exhausted every other resource. And even then, I think it's always helpful, but it's not necessarily the most, I would say, like cost benefit ratio, because you might just be purchasing something that might not get used in the first place. So that's just our takeaway is just, again, in addition to awesome in replacement of home hardening and defensible space principles, probably not the best to replace those long studied principles. So that is my presentation. So I'm actually gonna head it back towards Natasha to open up the Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Myra. That was an excellent presentation. I feel like you hunted down some really amazing images. I think some of my favorite was finding the before and after of the Lahaina house, which interestingly is a house that only did that work, removing the vegetation within their house for water damage. So there's a lot of other benefits that you can get from doing some of these home hardening tips and tricks. So you can even think about that for your community, how you're going to communicate that. But that was a great presentation. Round of applause. Great job. So now we're going to go into the Q&A. For the most part, for the first part of the Q&A, I like to go through the chat to make sure everyone's question was answered and bring it to the forefront. So one person had asked, so if you're recording your hours and money spent for 2025, that's put on the renewal form. Yes, that is. Thank you for your question. You will go to portal.firewise.org and report your hours and money spent on the portal directly to the NFPA and CAL FIRE. And then another person asked, I don't want to share names just in case you want to be private, but thank you for your questions. I do appreciate them. Is 1/8 screening the recommendation, or will 1/16 be the suggested standard? So the current standard is 1/8. I can't really speak to what the future would be, but the current standard is 1/8, and that's tested for airflow and all of those things. 1/16, you're most likely going to get adequate airflow as well, but something changes with 1/16. It's a smaller screen. And because of that, some people are unexpectedly having to clean their vents, which they've never had to do in their life before. So if you're going to install 1/16, just know that maybe you're going to have to take a look at that vent and clean it out a bit more. I would personally, if I had a house, I'd personally want to have the 1/16 on the side where I'm expecting the most embers to come through. That might be a smarter way to go through it. There's also many other options there. You can get more expensive vent covers from companies that are designing vents like an S shape. So the vents, when the embers come through, they don't even have a chance of getting in. You just have to kind of shop and explore. But 1/8 is one of the cheapest ways to do it, and it's still a great and effective way. Another question, is the annual renewal time point a good opportunity to expand the boundary or even merge two existing recognized communities as long as you submit updated assessment and 3-year action plan documents? So for that first question, it could definitely be an opportunity. I've asked CAL FIRE and NFPA myself, and I think I'm not too sure what the actual answer to that is when you're expanding or combining communities. That would be a great, I think, in my mind, opportunity to expand that boundary because you get to upgrade everything, the quantity of homes you have and the resident number. So you can do that. I'd also recommend contacting me if you're doing that in Ventura County, and then I can also just give CAL FIRE a heads up that you'll be expanding that boundary or combining communities. And another part of the question, can all the required supplemental portal data be entered via the renewal form, or do you have to enter everything like you're creating a brand new community? All the supplemental, I actually might, let me see, this question stumped me a bit. Can all the required supplemental portal data be entered via the renewal form, or do you have to enter everything like you're creating okay, so this is a part of that combining communities questions. So you could just enter it all in the renewal form. If you're going to rename the community, then you might have to create a whole new community, like a new account for the community. But again, contact me. I can contact the NFPA and let them know ahead of time. And then are you working on any sort of zone 3 requirements? That's also something that I'm not too sure of because we don't create the requirements. It would just be from CAL FIRE and the Board of Forestry if there was zone 3 requirements. But as far as I know, Myra, you can chime in if you know anything, but that I don't know if there is any requirements coming out for zone 3. That's beyond 100 feet.
Yeah, no, I actually haven't heard anything on a zone 3, and I would be really surprised if there were, just because of how far out that zone would be. And outside of that, I can only assume that there would be like really large properties and ranches that might have questions about that, but I would probably defer to Ventura County Fire Department as far as regulations like that. So if you have a specific question about that, we could, email us and we can ask Mike at Ventura County Fire Department, see if he's heard of anything. But at the moment, I don't have any Zone 3 information.
Thanks, Myra. All right, so if anybody has questions now, you're welcome to unmute yourself, so long as not everybody unmutes at the same time. But any questions from anyone else? We have about 10 minutes left. Be on Firewise Renewals or Home Hardening, the science.
Well, the reason I mentioned Zone 3 is that got said at that town hall, and I'm like, I never heard of Zone 3, and it just sort of went by really fast, and I'm like, whoa, okay, are you kidding me?
Oh,
But
yeah, 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 that makes
it
sense.
could be a Northern California thing, right? Because their homes are in forests, so I've seen videos where they're chainsawing trees well away from their house.
Oh, wow.
Or I
Yeah,
mean, thinning them or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know too much about Zone 3. Yeah, not too sure, but I'm curious to maybe re-listen to that Zone 0 workshop and see what we can I think we have the YouTube video in the chat, so maybe we can see if it was like a misspoken thing, like maybe they were really talking about Zone 2, or if it really was Zone 3, then curious to know what they were thinking of or talking
Okay.
about.
Natasha, I have a question about Zone 3 and beyond. Uh, what is the homeowners association responsibility for areas where there are easements that are the properties have where we are the properties are quite large, an acre or more. Uh, but again, back to the what is the homeowners association responsibility for the common areas?
Oh, that's a great question. I'd say first looking if that common area is within 100 feet of a home, then you'll want to abide by the regulations that are mentioned in Standard 515, linked in the chat. And that's primarily to reduce laddering opportunities. So still trimming up those trees 6 feet up and or 1/3 the height of the tree. Things like that. If it's beyond 100 feet, I guess it'd also be, is it a structure in itself? So in your HOA community, do you have like a building in that common area? And that building in essential is a house as well. So you'll also want to create defensible space there. If it's something like most HOA communities, I think they have those common buildings, so they still have to have home hardening and defensible space added to those buildings ideally. And then also the only other ones I've seen is really like green belts within a community. Do you have another example, Zig?
Yeah, well, this is basically bridle trails and the area on the bridle trails, and there's an arroyo that has a lot of dead wood and a lot of debris. So I don't know whose responsibility is for the arroyo and then the bridle trails themselves.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. I feel like that's a good question for our fuels and chipper coordinator or another person on our team, but I'll try to take a stab at that. So you're talking about fuels beyond the 100 feet. We do some fuels project as a fire safe council when we're funded by grants or Ventura County Fire Department. Those are opportunities to maybe make sure that it's like not having invasive species in it, or it's kind of hard to like determine what exactly that specific environment needs. But fuels projects beyond 100 feet can be very complicated and complex as far as the little knowledge that I know. You have to make sure that you're doing like a fuels treatment in that area when there's no like endangered species that are mating season, all those things. I'd imagine that it could be like an area where you could do a fuels treatment project, like goat grazing or prescribed burning, but it all depends on that specific arroyo and those specific environmental conditions. But there's no HOA response. I mean, I don't know, I can't speak to your HOA, but as far as I know, you only have a responsibility of 100 feet for that. Myra, do you want to chime in there?
I think I was just gonna say that I think it ultimately also depends on whether it's like private land or public land, just because, you know, there, like who oversees that. So whether it's a county, whether it's a conservation, whether it's within the HOA boundaries, then they might have a different regulation. But as far as from a wildfire perspective, like unfortunately that's just outside of like our scope of work, and so unfortunately we can't really speak too far outside of that zone 100 feet, just because we're a little bit more uninformed about those areas where our expertise is really like protecting structures and individual homes.
Who do you suggest that we talk to? The fire department or what?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
would
I'd say
say
fire
they're,
department.
yeah,
Yeah.
fire department.
Thank
Mhm.
you.
I know I talked to one HOA just this week, and they have some sort of creek or something in their community, but they have like a regulation to make sure that it stays a riparian habitat, and everything in there has to be kind of relatively untouched. So sometimes there's things you just don't know about the area, and you have to like learn them. But yeah, contact the fire department on that one. Any other questions, home hardening? Okay, I got a question in the chat. So, who is responsible for implementing Zone Zero requirement? Do you want me to answer this, Myra, or do you want me to? Yeah, okay, I'll go ahead. So it just depends. So if Zone Zero, which is the 0 to 5 feet, in your home is owned by you and not an HOA, then it'd be your responsibility for implementing just anything that is recommended in Zone Zero. So right now, I believe the regulation is you can't have mulch within Zone Zero, but we can find that out together here right now. And then otherwise, it's pretty much keeping it an ember resistant zone. And so you can, do whatever you're able to meet the recommendations of making that an ember resistant zone. Some people have HOAs, and then they're responsible for majority of the landscaping in their front yard, sometimes the backyard. And then in which case you'd want to contact your HOA and see if they can match their regulations to the Ventura County Fire Department's regulations. But on that note, I'm actually going to share my screen and show you how you can find the defensible space guidelines, or I won't tell you how to find it because that one you can just type it up on Google 515 or go to our website, but I'll show you the actual document. So this is standard 515. These are the regulations that, to my knowledge, Myra, you can chime in if I got this wrong, that you are required to actually have in your home today, or as soon as possible. And you can see that the standard is up to date as of April 1st, 2025. So we'll scroll down here. I'm kind of skipping some of these things, but they're all really
Natasha,
important
is there a
things.
way that you can maximize the screen to make it a little bit bigger, or maybe
That'd be great,
right
Damien.
there?
I'll go ahead and do that.
Thanks.
Let me try to. There we go. Does that work? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I think, Damien, you're muted if you wanted to say anything else.
If you want to start at the beginning again, at the top, I think
Oh,
that
the
that
top.
was
Yes.
people were
Let's
trying
go.
to look at what the name of the form was.
Standard 515. This is from Ventura County Fire Department. You could even Google Standard 515 or find it on our website resources page. but this was updated in April 1st, 2025. Also, welcoming Damien to our team. If you've been following along with us, Damien is a newest member of our team. He's joining us today, so thank you, Damien. So scrolling a little bit down, and we're going to scroll to, I think, page 4 of Standard 515. Here it is, defensible space zones. And we're going to look at what's required. So Zone 0, non-combustible zone. It tells you a little bit about the purpose and what Zone 0 is, the first 5 feet around a structure. And so non-combustible Zone 0 for new buildings and additions to existing buildings. So right now the regulation is any new buildings and any additions to existing buildings should abide by the prohibit, like having no combustible materials and vegetation in Zone 0. But if you're an existing community, then you'll continue along and find out what's in Zone 0. So additional requirements, you'll ideally plant no new trees within Zone 0, within 5 feet, and any existing tree canopies, you want to trim those branches away from your roof 10 feet. There's an exception for oak trees, and you can read the exception here. But ideally, you want to still have your tree in existence, so we're not in the business of removing trees as much as possible, but that canopy, just those branches and those leaves, should be 10 feet away from buildings. And then we'll go here, no firewood, and I believe doesn't talk about mulch just yet. Okay, let's find it out here. And then it talks about Zone 1, the transitional area as well. Zone 1, new trees can be planted and can have a maturity of a minimum of 10 feet. And then firewood is ideally located outside of Zone 1. Talks about Zone 2 as well. And actually, there you go, Kevin, there's a Zone 3.
Wow. Huh.
And it's talked about.
Holy
This is
cow.
why we read the regulations and we learn. This is a great table. It talks about all Zone 1 and Zone 2. Interesting to me is that in Zone 1, a single shrub should ideally not be higher than, have a maximum height of 4 feet and a diameter of 4 feet. So that is something to note. Grouping of shrubs is not allowed in Zone 1. And if you have a grouping of shrubs in Zone 2, that's 5 to 30 feet, it should be 4 feet wide. Or height, actually. Is that maximum height? That's a maximum height. Interesting. And then you have general requirements for all zones. I swear there was a mulch here thing, though, but let me see.
There it is, 357.
Okay, there we go. Good eye, Kevin. Combustible mulch and wood chips are prohibited within 5 feet of any structure. So that's something to note. Most communities we find have this. So that's one of the minimum requirements that you can have for Zone 0. I'm glad we found this because I was really worried I was telling everybody the wrong information.
But they also have a whole separate standard just for mulch. That's
We do have a whole
517.
separate standard, exactly.
Yeah.
And you can find that. Are you guys still able to follow along here, Ventura? Oh,
Yes.
yes, great. ECFD standards and guidelines is where you can find other standards and guidelines, including fencing requirements. Here's their standard on mulch and composting.
I'll try my
and
best to put it in the chat so that way people can find it.
That'd be great too, yeah. And it also talks about fencing requirements, which you're ideally having a non-combustible fence within 5 feet as well. But those are just some of the things I'd highly recommend giving Standard 515 a review, especially if you're an HOA community, and aligning your rules and regulations with that. It's definitely a read, so give yourself some time to read it. Any other questions we can answer?
There was a question in the chat.
Oh, great.
Oh, so sorry. And it says, in a community where there's an HOA, who's supposed to implement adherence to regulation for Zone 0?
Who's supposed to implement adherence? Oh, okay, adherence. When it comes to an HOA, I'm not too sure, to be honest. I've been able to connect with some HOAs, and then in their 3-year action plan, when we're talking about Firewise, they talk about communicating to their HOA and changing the regulation, but I'm not sure who's. Do you know, Myra?
I'm not too sure. I know that not every HOA is the same. So since they don't act all the same, I believe I believe you might have to double check with the HOA if that's something that they include in their like contracts with the homeowners. Is that, is it part of something that they keep up with, like they pay for the gardening and that sort of thing? So they may have to do that. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. But if you do have an HOA, and you want to get them in touch with me, I can walk them through some of the steps that's required, or just walk them through the 515 standard guideline. You can even send them the standard 515 guideline and say, hey, our rules go directly against what Ventura County Fire Department says. We should probably change this and start that conversation. I think starting that conversation is really important. And I'd also like to take this moment to just say thank you to everybody that is working so hard to make their communities safer, from wildfire, and going beforehand to prevent the risk of wildfire. So you guys are really doing a whole lot of work in your communities. So thank you so much for that.
I guess the last note I wanted to say about the HOAs too is that I think, and Natasha might have touched on this, is that not every single HOA board might be as informed about what those standards and guidelines are. So they might not even know that they're not in compliance with Ventura County Fire Department. And so it's not necessarily like going up to them and like accusing them of like purposely being against, guidelines. It's just that sometimes, again, you saw how big the standards and guidelines list was on that website, right? So all of these documents are sometimes a little overwhelming to make sure that we're in compliance with everything. So again, just starting that conversation is very important anyway. So yeah.
I have one
I
last
think
question.
oh yes, go ahead.
Yes.
What's Damien's birthday?
Oh, Damien, when's your birthday?
September 5th. It was just a couple weekends ago.
Oh,
Oh
happy
man.
birthday. It was just before you joined, I think. This
Thank
is
you.
his first week. This is your first week, right?
First
Yeah,
week, right?
first week.
So
That's
trying
Day
to write
4
some
on the
grants,
job.
make things happen.
Awesome. Well, we're at time, everybody, so we'll end it here. But thank you so much for attending. I see a lot of familiar faces, so it's always nice to see you all. And schedule those chats with me. I'd love to have any sort of one-on-one conversations with anyone that has questions on Firewise. I mainly do Firewise, so if it's another question, I might refer you to somebody else in our team. But yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
first, hi, Terry.
Hi, bye.
It was so
Bye,
nice to see
everyone.
everybody. Thank you so much.